Hey friends, welcome back to my kitchen. If you're new here, my name is Jen. I do cooking, canning, and food preservation videos every week, and sometimes I even post garden content or vlogs. If that seems like the sort of thing that you'd be into, I hope that you'll consider subscribing and sticking around. Today, by popular request of my youngest child, I am making white chicken chili. So I went ahead and I roasted off some boneless, skinless chicken breasts. And I just seasoned these with some of the same seasonings that are going to be going into the chili so that it would all kind of melt together once it cooks. Now, if you wanted to skip the step of roasting your chicken breast and then shredding it yourself, you could 100% just go get a rotisserie chicken and pull it off the bone and shred it up. That would be perfectly fine. But since I had chicken breast in my freezer, I decided to go ahead and use that. Now, I know I say this in just about every video, but for those that might be new, we've gotten a lot of new subscribers lately. I'm cooking for a family of 6 adults. So I usually double my recipes so that we can have leftovers, but I always make sure to leave the ingredient list for a single batch in the box below. So don't panic if what you see me doing doesn't line up with the recipe that I've listed below. It's just because I'm doubling the recipe. Now this chili comes together very quickly. This is definitely a convenience food in my opinion. And the longest part of this entire process is just shredding your chicken. So once you get your chicken shredded in a heavy bottom pot, you're going to add a couple tablespoons of any kind of like neutral flavored oil, whatever your favorite kind of neutral oil is. And then to my oil, I'm going to add my chopped yellow onion. And I also have a couple of jalapeños that I'm going to add in with the onion that I have de-seeded. Now, you can leave the seeds in if you like, but just for textural reasons, I went ahead and pulled the seeds out. Not because of the heat factor or anything, because in my opinion, jalapeños this time of year just really aren't all that spicy anyway. But if you're eating this soup, you really don't want to like bite down on a hard seed. So go ahead and seed your jalapeños. I went ahead and sauteed those just until the onions were starting to become a little translucent and the peppers were starting to get soft. And to that, I added a bunch of minced garlic. Now, the recipe calls for 2 cloves, but if you're like me, garlic is one of those things. If the recipe says 2, it really means 20. I don't know. Just add as much garlic as you would like to have in your soup. I'm just going to saute this with the onions and the jalapenos for about a minute until it gets fragrant. I did turn the heat down a little bit because I don't want to burn my garlic. Burnt garlic is very unpleasant, so just keep an eye on it and move it around so it doesn't scorch to the bottom of your pan. Now we're going to go ahead and season, and I season much heavier than the recipe actually calls for. I'm adding some oregano and I'm adding some cumin here. Some people don't like cumin that much. If you don't like it, leave it out. You could add some coriander here too if you like that sort of thing. I went pretty heavy on the cumin just because I really enjoy cumin. The recipe calls for a teaspoon of each, but I actually ended up adding more like a heaping tablespoon of each. So I'm just going to let my spices get warmed up a little bit in that hot oil in the bottom of the pan before I move on to the rest of the ingredients. The recipe listed below calls for 5 cups of low sodium chicken broth. Well, I don't have low sodium chicken broth. I have some home canned chicken broth and I have some home canned turkey broth. So that is what I'm using today. And I'll show you here that I'm adding 2 quarts. I actually, full transparency, did end up adding another quart of chicken broth. I had some on the shelf back from March and it really needed to be used up. So I used 3 quarts of liquid in total. But as I said, I am doubling this recipe. So once I get all my broth added, I'm just going to give it a really good stir to make sure none of the spices or anything are stuck to the bottom of the pan. And I'm going to go ahead and let this go on about medium-high heat until this broth comes up to temperature before I add anything else to it. Once the broth is nice and warm, I'm going to go ahead and add 2 cans of green chilies. These are roasted green chilies. These are the little 4.5-ounce cans. Now, the recipe does call for 2 cans, and I really should have added 4, but 2 is all I had in my pantry, so I just kind of went with it. It would be a lot more flavorful if I had added the 4 cans, but it was still delicious just fine. And just like with all my other seasonings, I'm going to go ahead and add some black pepper and some salt. I won't tell you how much to add. It depends on how salty your broth is. It depends on your personal taste buds. What I like for salt content, you may find to be bland or too salty. So just season with your soul and add as much black pepper and salt as you like. I'm going to give it a really good mix, and I'm just going to let this continue to heat up. It will not take very long. That's why I suggest using a heavy bottom pot. They heat much more evenly. And then once it's hot, it's almost simmering, I'm going to add my beans. Now I added 4 cans of Great Northern beans. You can use any kind of white bean you like, but you want to reserve at least 1 can of it and kind of smush them around with a fork. By doing this, adding these in with this like refried bean texture, it's going to help thicken your chili a little bit. It's not going to be super thick. This is a soupy chili, but the starch from the beans will thicken it just a little. And then I'm just going to stir this up really well and make sure that big glob of smashed beans is mixed in completely. There's no big chunks floating around or sinking down to the bottom to get stuck. And then I'm going to put a lid on this and let it boil for a little while to finish cooking the beans through, get it nice and hot and ready for the last couple of ingredients. I actually let this go a little longer than I had wanted to because I got to jaw-jacking with my sister and lost track of time. So I'm back and I'm going to add a couple cups of frozen corn to my soup. This will bring the temperature down, but that's okay because after we add the corn and all of our chicken and the juices that our chicken were sitting in, we're going to give it a good mix and we're going to go ahead and just let it simmer. This is going to cook off some of the excess liquid. It's going to condense down the flavors. It's going to make the soup taste a whole lot better, so just let it simmer for about another 10 minutes. Now at this point your soup is essentially done. There's only one more ingredient to add, but to add that we need to make sure that we are no longer boiling our soup. You want to taste it at this point, see if it needs any more salt and pepper, and then once it's stopped boiling, I am adding a cup of sour cream. The recipe calls for half a cup. Now, I have seen some folks add heavy cream to theirs. I have seen some folks add cream cheese to their white chicken chili. I say use what you have. If you don't have sour cream, but you have cream cheese, go for it. It's going to be just as good, maybe even a little bit better. If I'm being completely honest, if I had had more sour cream, I probably would have added more sour cream. But instead, I did actually put a splash or 2 of heavy cream in with my soup. That's why it looks a little lighter here. So as I'm serving this up, I wanted to let you know you have a couple of options to garnish this with. I'm going to garnish with cheese and cilantro and tortilla strips. Now, I did also have avocado, but we all know an avocado is never ripe when you need it, and the next day it'll be bad. So I could not use my avocados, they were still hard. So you could do avocado, cheese, cilantro, you could do pickled red onions, pickled radishes. I actually ended up putting some of my homemade fermented jalapeno hot sauce on mine, and it was phenomenal. If you'd like a link to that recipe, I can leave a card in the upper right hand corner. So yeah, I hope that you give this white chicken chili a try. It's super easy. It doesn't take very long at all to make, especially if you use a shortcut of a rotisserie chicken. If you give this a try, leave me a comment and let me know what you thought about it. And until next time, friends, happy cooking.